The invitation to Scarlett's wedding arrived on a Tuesday, and I knew immediately I was screwed. "You have to bring a date," my coworker Jessica said, reading the invitation over my shoulder. "It says +1 right there. No showing up alone to another office wedding looking sad and pathetic." I stared at the fancy cardstock in my hands and felt my stomach drop. Scarlett from accounting was getting married, and somehow I'd made it onto the guest list. The wedding was in 6 weeks. Black tie event at the Riverside Hotel. All my coworkers would be there with their perfect spouses and their perfect lives. And I would be alone. Again. My name is Brian Miller, and I work at Henderson Insurance in downtown Portland. Been there 4 years now, processing claims and trying to blend into the background. My coworkers think I'm just a quiet single guy who keeps to himself. They have no idea that every night after work I go home and become Bella. Beautiful Bella with her long red hair and curves that make me feel complete. Bella who dances around my apartment in silk dresses and feels more real than Brian ever has. Bella who will never get invited to a wedding because she doesn't exist to anyone but me. "Come on, Brian," Jessica said, perching on the edge of my desk. "There has to be someone. What about that girl from the coffee shop you're always talking about?" I made up that girl 6 months ago when Jessica kept asking why I never dated anyone. Created a whole fake relationship because it was easier than explaining why I spent my weekends alone. Easier than admitting that the only woman in my life was me. "We broke up," I said quietly. "Again? Man, you have terrible luck with women." Jessica shook her head. "Well, you better find someone fast." Scarlett specifically told me she doesn't want any sad single guys bringing down the vibe at her reception. That night I sat in my apartment staring at the wedding invitation and trying to figure out what to do. I could make up some excuse and not go. Food poisoning. Family emergency. Sudden death of a relative they'd never heard of. But missing Scarlett's wedding would be weird. People would ask questions. Or I could go alone and spend the entire night making awkward small talk while everyone pitied the pathetic single guy in the corner. Or, the idea hit me like lightning. Crazy lightning that made no sense but wouldn't leave my head no matter how hard I tried to ignore it. What if I didn't go alone? What if I brought Bella? I know how insane that sounds. Bringing my female alter ego to a work function where everyone knows me as Brian. But the more I thought about it, the more possible it seemed. Nobody at work had ever seen me outside the office. They knew nothing about my personal life except the lies I told them. What if Bella was real to them? What if she was my mysterious girlfriend that I'd been keeping secret? The out-of-town relationship that explained why I never brought anyone around? It would never work. Too many things could go wrong. Someone might recognize something about my face. My voice might slip. One wrong move and my entire carefully constructed double life would explode in the most public way possible. But the alternative was showing up alone and being the object of everyone's pity for an entire evening. Or missing the wedding and fielding awkward questions for months afterward. 2 weeks later I was shopping for a dress. Not online like usual. Actually in a store where real women tried on real clothes. The salesgirl at Nordstrom was incredibly helpful when I explained I was buying something for my girlfriend who was the same size as me. She picked out 3 dresses that would be perfect for a wedding. Elegant but not attention-grabbing. Beautiful but not over the top. The navy blue one fit like it was made for me. I spent the next month preparing. Practicing Bella's voice for hours until it sounded natural. Learning to walk in heels without looking like a newborn deer. Getting my makeup perfect so it would look flawless under the hotel's bright lights. The hardest part was the wig. My usual red one looked too obviously fake up close. I splurged on an expensive human hairpiece that looked and felt real. Dark brown with subtle highlights that complemented my skin tone. When I put it on and looked in the mirror, I saw someone who could actually pass as Brian's girlfriend. 3 days before the wedding, I had everything ready. The dress. The shoes. The jewelry. The clutch purse with tissues and lipstick and breath mints. I'd practiced my backstory until I could recite it in my sleep. Bella was from Seattle. We'd been dating long distance for 8 months. She was an artist. Quiet but sweet. The morning of the wedding, I woke up with my heart pounding. This was really happening. In 6 hours, I would walk into that hotel ballroom as Bella and try to convince everyone that I was a woman, that I was Brian's girlfriend. The transformation took 3 hours. Every detail had to be perfect. Foundation to smooth my skin. Concealer to hide any trace of stubble. Eye makeup that made my eyes look bigger and more feminine. Lipstick that wouldn't smudge when I drank champagne. The dress fit perfectly. The shoes made my legs look longer. The wig framed my face like it grew there. When I looked in the full-length mirror, I didn't see Brian anymore. I saw Bella. Confident, beautiful Bella, who belonged at a fancy wedding. The hardest part was walking into that hotel alone. Every step across the marble lobby felt like walking through quicksand. What if someone recognized me immediately? What if my voice gave me away? What if I tripped in these heels and made a scene? But when I walked into the ballroom, nobody stared. Nobody pointed. A few people smiled politely as I looked around for familiar faces. I was just another wedding guest in a pretty dress. Brian. Jessica's voice made me freeze. She was walking toward me with a huge smile, and I realized she expected me to be her friend's boyfriend's date. Expected me to know who she was. "You must be the famous Bella we've heard so much about," she said, giving me a quick hug. "I'm Jessica. I work with Brian." "Nice to meet you," I said in Bella's soft voice. "Brian's told me so much about you. Where is he anyway?" My blood turned to ice. She expected Brian to be here. Expected to see both of us together. How had I not thought of this? How had I planned everything except for the most obvious problem? I started to say, then stopped. What could I possibly say? That he was in the bathroom? That he'd gone to get the car? Any lie I told would fall apart the moment she went looking for him. "Actually," I said, improvising desperately, "Brian got food poisoning this morning. Really bad. He's been throwing up for hours." Jessica's face fell. "That's terrible. Why didn't you just stay home with him?" "He insisted I come. Said he didn't want to disappoint Scarlett by having both of us miss her wedding. You know how Brian is. Always putting other people first." "That sounds like him." Jessica looked genuinely concerned. "Is he going to be okay?" "I think so. Just needs to rest." He was mortified about missing this. For the next 2 hours I was Bella. I made small talk with Brian's coworkers and their spouses. Answered questions about my relationship with just the right amount of detail. Danced with Scarlett's cousin who asked me 3 times. Laughed at jokes and complimented dresses and felt more alive than I had in years. Everyone loved Bella. They thought she was charming and sweet and perfect for Brian. Several people told me how happy they were that he'd finally found someone special. How much he'd changed since we'd started dating. How they could see he was in love. "He talks about you constantly," said Mark from HR during dinner. "We were starting to think he was making you up. If only he knew how right he was." The evening was perfect until Scarlett's bouquet toss. All the single women gathered behind the bride, including me, because Jessica dragged me over there. Scarlett turned around and threw those flowers right at my head. I caught them without thinking. Pure instinct. And suddenly, everyone was cheering and pushing me forward to where the photographer was waiting to take pictures. "Your turn next." Scarlett laughed, hugging me tight. "I can tell Brian's the marrying type." I smiled and nodded and posed for pictures while my heart hammered against my ribs. Marriage. They were talking about marriage. Between Brian and Bella. Between me and myself. The ride home was surreal. I sat in my car in the hotel parking lot, still wearing Bella's dress and holding Scarlett's bouquet. The evening had been magical. For a few hours I'd lived as a real woman with real relationships and real conversations. I'd been part of something instead of watching from the outside. But it was all based on a lie that was getting bigger and more complicated every minute. Monday morning I walked into the office as Brian and immediately got swarmed with questions about the wedding. About Bella. About how she was feeling after meeting everyone. Jessica wanted to know if we were planning to move in together. Mark asked if I was going to propose soon. "She's amazing," I heard myself saying. "Everything I ever wanted in a girlfriend." And that was true. Bella was everything I wanted. She just happened to also be me. For weeks afterward, everyone at work talked about Brian's mysterious girlfriend. How beautiful she was. How lucky I was to have found her. How obvious it was that we were meant for each other. The lie grew and grew until it had a life of its own. Bella became real to everyone at Henderson Insurance. She had opinions about movies and favorite restaurants and plans for the future. She was everything they thought Brian deserved. But she was also disappearing from my real life. The more I talked about Bella at work, the less I could be her at home. She belonged to them now. To their version of my story. She wasn't mine anymore. 6 months later, Jessica asked when she was going to meet Bella again. When we were all going to go out for drinks together. When she could double date with me and Bella and her boyfriend Tom. She's been really busy with work, I said. New project. Lots of overtime. But I could see the questions in Jessica's eyes. The doubt creeping in. How long could I keep making excuses? How long before someone wanted proof that Bella actually existed? The answer came 2 weeks later when Scarlett announced her first anniversary party. Another invitation. Another +1. Another chance for everyone to see Brian and Bella together. Except this time they'd be looking for both of us. This time the lie I'd built would finally collapse under its own weight. That night I sat in my apartment wearing Bella's wedding dress and holding Scarlett's dried bouquet, looking at myself in the mirror and trying to figure out how to untangle the mess I'd created. I wanted to feel real, to be part of something, to have people see me as worthy of love and happiness. But I'd built it all on something that couldn't last. Tomorrow I'd have to tell them Bella was gone. That she'd moved away or we'd broken up or she'd never existed at all. I'd have to go back to being pathetic single Brian who couldn't keep a girlfriend. But for one perfect evening I'd been everything I ever wanted to be. Beautiful and loved and real. Even if it was all pretend. Even if it broke my heart to let her go. Some dreams are too beautiful to last. But that doesn't make them less worth having.